T. Schneider from his latest album, Heroes. Well, if you're a David Bowie fan, you've got all his albums from the very early days. I'm sure you'll agree with me that Low and Heroes really are different from the others in that they show a sort of completely new side to David Bowie's musical character. Both of those last ones, of course, cooperated with keyboards and synthesizer virtuoso Brian Eno to produce of Bowie a rather completely new style. Well, in Bowie's terms, he was looking not just to be unpredictable, but for a new musical language, and that, as he told our reporter John Tobler, is why he teamed up with Brian Eno.
I needed somebody to help me with that because I was a bit lost and I was too subjective about it all. And so I asked Brian Eno if he would help me. And that's how the whole thing started. It was a process of trying out new methods and new processes of writing, rather than for the quite more obvious line of being unpredictable. Because I brought two out now of the same nature, and that's sort of not predictable with me yet.
I hear that Eno was really very impressed when he first met you and Iggy, and you seemed to be able to hum No Pussyfooting.
Yeah, I know his work quite well.
Do you in fact have a tendency to try and investigate the more off-the-wall happenings in music?
They're the ones that I tend to gravitate towards, yeah. I've got a particular code of working, which is if it works, it's out of date. So I generally apply that to every given situation in music or on tour or whatever. And especially in music, I hardly ever listen to anything that's currently in vogue or popular. I tend to buy rather obscure kinds of things.
Such as?
Well, see, the last things really that I bought were Steve Reich and Philip Glass things, which I've been listening to for quite some time. But I again, when it comes to music, my influences tend to come more from observation of the environment that I'm in, which is fairly obvious when you look at the albums and where they were made. They tend to very much mirror where I was. You can tell more or less which street in the city I was in by the young Americans. You know it's Philadelphia. I mean, it's, and Diamond Dogs is definitely LA, and New York. I mean,
it's funny you should talk about Diamond Dogs, because you also said that you sort of made that as a plastic soul album, which you...
No, Young Americans.
Yeah, sorry.
The Young Americans.
Yeah. It was just a joke record.
No, it was not a joke record. It was seriously a plastic soul album. It was definitely me portraying, as a white Englishman, my view of American black music. As somebody who watches it more from outside and actually gets involved with it inside.
Do you in fact prefer the current disco-type sound to the soul music of the 60s, which I'm sure you were more familiar with originally?
No, I don't. I'm not a big fan of disco at all. I loathe it. I get so embarrassed that my things do so well in discos. I've had two enormous disco hits now. Can't hold my head up now when I go into arty clubs.
One of Bowie's embarrassing disco smash hits. That one's from 73, of course, Genie. 27 after 10 o'clock here. Pete Baker up to 11. This with Rock Reflections. Back with our interview with David Bowie. Of course, Bowie is going to start a new world tour early next year. We asked him exactly who he will have backing him.
That's very difficult to say at the moment. One would like to work with Eno and Fripp on stage, but of course to get Brian out of his apartment takes about a week. So to get him on the road is an impossibility. But I think he'll do selected cities with me. Fripp is a bit more easy to accommodate. I mean, he can go on the road and it's no great pain. But I don't know whether he'd want to do a very long tour. So I'm going to have to look for other guys as well.
It was said at one time when you were doing Low that your poetic muse had deserted you momentarily. And that was why many of the songs were short lyrically,
yeah,
as opposed to the somewhat lengthier stuff that you'd done before. Is that still...
I guess there was some truth in that, yes. I mean, if it can be applied to what I said earlier, that it was strictly a question of experimentation and discovery. I had no statement to make on Low. I was low on Zayden, and it was low profile in its own way, and it was a very indulgent album for me to find out what I wanted to do musically. The strange thing that came out of Low is that in my meanderings in new processes and new methods of writing, when Eno and I listened back to it, we realised that we created new information without even realising it, and that by not trying to write about anything, we'd written probably more about something or other that one couldn't quite put one's finger on than we could have had we actually gone out and said, let's do a concept album. It was quite remarkable. And the same, so we thought, well, great, fine, let's do that again. It's quite exciting. So we did that with Heroes. We used an immense amount of imagery and juxtaposed one against the other, and used incredibly startling methods of writing. Anything from random selection out of books, musically as well. I mean, chord changes were quite arbitrary sometimes. And the total effect astonished both of us when we sat back and listened to the finished one.
Do you intend to pursue this direction rather than getting back to the more lyrical?
Yes, we always said, because we're both artists, you see, we both said that we do a trilogy. So our triptych will be completed. We will do one more at least.
Sons of the Silent Age, another one from his latest album, Heroes. 27 away from 11 o'clock on Piccadilly Radio. We next asked David Bowie about his relationship with Iggy Pop. Of course, he writes quite a lot of the lyrics on Iggy Pop's last two albums. We asked him about this.
Well, one must look at it this way, that Jim hadn't worked for at least 2 years, had been through some very bad times, and needed more than a little bit of support, emotionally and mentally, as well as sort of, materially. And I think he resolved most of his problems on the first album. And if it shows at all, my influence or attributes won't be quite as recognisable in any future stuff that we're doing. And we're doing another album after this. Jim's very much in charge of his own situation now, realises what he wants and how he wants to write and what he wants to write about. And he's becoming an excellent songwriter.
James Osterberg, or Iggy Pop, and very much Bowie influenced The Passenger there. But we asked David Bowie about a couple of years ago. He said to the music press of Great Britain he didn't really care a damn whether his albums sold or it didn't sell. What would he say to that?
I still feel very much that way. Although I have to go against myself because I'm so excited about the new stuff that I'm doing that I want people to hear it, so I'm rather at a quandary.
Do you look back on what the stuff you've done and say, well, that one really wasn't,
yes.
albums?
Yes, I look at them all and there's not one I like. The only one I like is Young Americans because it's the only likeable album, but the others, one could hardly apply the adjective likeable to any of them. It's like painting, really. I mean, not every painting that you do is going to be good, but you've done them and there you are. And I kind of tend to look at albums rather like that. I admit, some of the ideas didn't come off. There's some good work in there somewhere, though.
We should ask about this new film that you're doing.
It's a partial life story, a biography of Egon Schiele, an expressionist painter of early 19th century. And it's sort of a fairly quiet, intimate study of his relationship with his model. And it's a non-sensationalist film. It's quite, again, it's a reaction against the last film. Most of the things I do are reactions to the last thing I did.
Kilometers on the red lights.
Always crashing in the same car. It's from the Low album by Bowie. Final track from him coming up after the break.
Piccadilly, Stereo 97.
Originally from Ziggy Stardust, a live version here of Moon Age Daydream. Okay, 12 minutes away from 11 o'clock on Piccadilly Radio.